The white lights of St. Mary's Hospital reflected off the freshly waxed floor as Emily Richards hurried down the corridor with quick steps. The silence of the early morning was interrupted only by the constant beeping of monitors and the occasional whisper of the night staff. In her 10 years as an ICU nurse in Chicago, she had learned to navigate the hospital as if it were an extension of her own home. But that night, something was different. The loss of young Ryan, a 17-year-old student who had arrived as a victim of a motorcycle accident, had broken something inside her. The image of his eyes losing their light under her hands, despite 20 minutes of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, haunted her thoughts. "You did everything you could, Emily." The voice of Dr. Sarah Thompson, cardiologist and longtime friend, interrupted her thoughts as she organized the final chart. "Sometimes it doesn't depend on us." "Then who does it depend on, Sarah?" The question escaped more bitterly than she intended. "God? Where was he when that boy needed him?" Sarah adjusted her thin-framed glasses, studying her friend's face with concern. "You need to rest. Your shift ended 2 hours ago." Emily nodded, finding no energy to argue. Lately, her faith, inherited from a traditionally Catholic family from rural Illinois, seemed insufficient in the face of the suffering she witnessed daily. How to reconcile a God of love with the brutally random nature of death and pain? "I'm going home," she muttered, putting her stethoscope in her bag. "See you tomorrow." The rain falling outside seemed to reflect her state of mind. Heavy drops pounded the windshield of her Toyota Corolla as she drove down I-90, the city lights creating blurred patterns through the wet glass. The radio played softly a song she barely registered, her thoughts lost in increasingly deep questions. "If you're really there," she whispered to herself, "give me a sign, anything." Maybe it was fatigue or the reduced visibility from the torrential rain, or simply fate. As she tried to swerve to avoid a truck that braked abruptly in front of her, Emily lost control of the car. The world transformed into a blur of motion, the steering wheel spinning under her hands, the wet asphalt offering no resistance to the tires, the violent impact against the guardrail. The sound of twisted metal was the last thing her ears registered before silence. Then, inexplicably, Emily found herself standing beside her own wrecked car. Paramedics were running towards the vehicle, where her body remained motionless, trapped in the wreckage. The scene seemed surreal, like watching a movie where she herself was the unconscious protagonist. "What's happening?" The question escaped, her lips directed at no one in particular. "You asked for a sign, my child." The voice was familiar in a way that made her heart ache. Turning slowly, Emily saw her grandfather, William, exactly as she remembered him before his passing 5 years ago. Well-trimmed white hair, grey mustache, brown eyes that always seemed to contain a universe of wisdom. "Grandpa Will?" Her voice faltered. "How is this possible?" "Come with me, Emmy," he smiled, using the nickname only he used. "There's someone who wants to talk to you." As she took hesitant steps towards her grandfather, the accident scene began dissolving around them. The rain ceased, the sirens silenced, and a soft, welcoming light began to envelop them. It wasn't a blinding light, but warm and comforting, like the first ray of sunshine after a long winter. The light began taking shape, condensing into a human silhouette. A man of simple appearance, wearing clothes of rough fabric, materialized before them. His eyes, however, were anything but ordinary, deep, ancient, conveying a love Emily had never experienced. "Jesus," she whispered, falling to her knees instinctively. "Rise, Emily." His voice was like music. "I didn't come to receive your reverence, but to show you something important." Gently, he touched her forehead. Instantly, visions flooded her mind. A transformed America, people walking the streets with small devices implanted in their hands and foreheads. They were subcutaneous chips that replaced documents, credit cards, keys, all identification concentrated in a single point. "It seems so convenient," she commented, observing the ease with which people carried out transactions. "Convenience is just the beginning," Jesus replied, his voice now shadowed by sadness. "Observe what comes next." The images advanced. The implants became mandatory. Those who resisted gradually lost access to jobs, basic services, even food. Churches began to adapt their theology, justifying the acceptance of technology with convenient interpretations of Scripture. "This has nothing to do with the mark of the beast," they will say, Jesus explained, as Emily watched a famous pastor receiving the implant in a televised ceremony. "It's just technology, and God doesn't condemn progress." The most disturbing, however, was what happened internally to people. Jesus touched her forehead again, and her vision changed. Now she could see beyond physical bodies, observing how a kind of mist formed between people's spirits and the divine presence after receiving the implants. "They can no longer feel me," Jesus explained with deep melancholy. "The connection weakens until it almost disappears, but so subtly that they don't even realize what they've lost." Emily felt hot tears running down her face. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you asked for a sign," he replied simply, "and because I need people to warn others before it's too late. Time is short, Emily." "But who would believe me? I'm just a nurse." Jesus smiled tenderly. "It was precisely because you are just a nurse that you were chosen. It's the simple ones who change the world, Emily. It has always been so." He touched her chest right over her heart. "You won't be alone. There are others receiving the same call in different parts of the world. When you wake up, you'll have a gift, not to impress, but to confirm the truth of what you saw." "What gift?" she asked, feeling a tingling spreading from her chest throughout her body. "You'll know when the time comes," Jesus replied. "Now it's time to go back." Her grandfather William hugged her briefly. "Be strong, Emmy. You've always been the bravest of us." Jesus gestured towards the accident that now seemed to be occurring at a great distance. "Remember," he said, his voice already sounding distant, "time is short. People need to know." Before she could respond, Emily felt herself pulled back into her body. The transcendental peace gave way to intense pain, and the sounds of the physical world invaded her senses again. Sirens, urgent voices, the metallic noise of rescue equipment. "We have a pulse," someone shouted. "She's coming back." Emily briefly opened her eyes, facing the concerned face of a paramedic. She tried to speak, but something prevented it, a tube in her throat. The ambulance jolted, racing through the wet streets of Chicago towards the hospital. As she struggled to maintain consciousness, a single thought remained clear in her. Feverish mind. Time is short. People need to know. On her chest, invisible to the paramedics treating her injuries, a small cross-shaped mark began to form, exactly where Jesus had touched her during her vision. It was the symbol of a calling that would forever change her life and possibly the fate of countless souls. The ambulance accelerated through the rainy night, its sirens cutting through the silence of the early morning, carrying not just a patient on the brink of death, but a newly appointed messenger marked by a divine encounter that the scientific world would call hallucination, but that for Emily would be the beginning of an extraordinary journey. Technically, you shouldn't be alive. Dr. Robert Anderson, chief neurosurgeon at St. Mary's Hospital, studied Emily's exams with a frown that oscillated between scientific fascination and perplexity. 3 weeks had passed since the accident, and her recovery defied all medical expectations. The rib fractures are almost completely consolidated, the internal bleeding reabsorbed, and the neurological indicators, well, they look like someone who suffered a slight stumble, not a head-on collision at 55 miles per hour. Emily observed the doctor in silence, without sharing the true miracle, the cross-shaped mark over her heart, the crystalline memories of her experience with Jesus, and the growing sensation of an inexplicable power tingling in her hands whenever she thought about healing. "When can I return to work?" she asked, eager to leave the hospital room where she felt more prisoner than patient. "Technically, tomorrow," Dr. Anderson replied reluctantly. "Clinically, I recommend at least 2 more weeks of rest. The human body wasn't designed to recover at this speed, Emily. There may be consequences we haven't identified yet." The only consequence that really mattered didn't appear on any exam. Since waking up in the ICU after the accident, Emily had been living with an almost suffocating urgency. The divine call to warn the world about the technological danger that threatened humanity's spiritual connection. After the doctor left, her reflections were interrupted by the arrival of Sarah Thompson, who brought not only flowers, but an expression of genuine concern. Miraculous recovery. That's what everyone on the team is saying, commented the cardiologist, sitting on the edge of the bed. Robert is perplexed. He's thinking about publishing an article about your case. I'm not a case study, Sarah, Emily replied with a slight smile. No, you're my friend who almost left us, Sarah's voice softened, and who apparently had an experience during the coma that the team finds interesting. Emily stiffened. What did they tell you? That you woke up talking about Jesus, technological implants, and a divine mission, Sarah replied directly. Mark from nursing said you were quite agitated, trying to pull out the tubes to alert people about some imminent danger. The confirmation that her most sacred experience was being discussed as a psychiatric symptom in the hospital corridors felt like a physical blow. It was real, Sarah, Emily stated with a certainty that surprised even herself. I know how it sounds. Cerebral hypoxia, trauma, drug-induced hallucinations. I've seen cases like that. But this was different. To her surprise, Sarah didn't immediately contest. She studied her with analytical eyes, more evaluative than judgmental. Consider this. If it was just a hallucination, why am I recovering like this? Emily continued. How do you explain a healing that Robert himself calls impossible? Medicine has limitations, Emily. There are documented cases of inexplicable recoveries. And what if there are explanations beyond what science knows? Sarah sighed, a gesture that carried decades of scientific skepticism. What exactly did you see in this experience? Emily hesitated briefly, fearing judgment, but something in Sarah's gaze encouraged her. Slowly, she described the encounter with her grandfather, Jesus' presence, and the disturbing visions of a future where technological implants gradually separated people from their spiritual connection. Jesus showed me how these seemingly harmless devices create a barrier, not instantaneous but gradual and insidious, between the human spirit and the divine presence, she concluded, carefully observing her friend's reaction. Sarah remained, silent for long moments, processing. You think I've gone crazy, Emily finally stated. No, Sarah replied slowly. I think you lived a profound and significant experience for you. The human mind is extraordinary, especially under extreme stress. It was a diplomatic answer, neither complete validation nor invalidation. Emily decided to risk more. There's something else, she said, partially unbuttoning her hospital gown to reveal the small cross-shaped mark over her heart. This appeared after the vision, exactly where he touched me. Sarah leaned in, examining the mark with clinical interest. It looks like an unusual birthmark, or maybe... It wasn't here before the accident, Emily interrupted. Any nurse who knows me can confirm, and it's not just a mark, she hesitated. I believe I received a gift. What kind of gift? In response, Emily extended her hand to the vase of flowers Sarah had brought. Among the fresh roses, one was visibly wilted, its darkened petals beginning to fall. As she touched it with her fingertips, concentrating on the tingling sensation she now recognized well, something extraordinary happened. A faint bluish luminosity emanated from her fingers, almost imperceptible in the daylight but undeniably present. The wilted flower quivered slightly, and before Sarah's widened eyes, its petals regained vigor, opening again in a vibrant red. My God, Sarah whispered, the scientist momentarily disconcerted. Exactly, Emily replied, feeling simultaneously exhausted and euphoric from the demonstration. I believe I can heal, not just plants, but people. Sarah stood up abruptly, taking a few steps away from the bed, her face a mask of internal conflict. I need to think, she stammered. There might be logical explanations. Maybe the flower wasn't really dead, maybe... Sarah, Emily gently interrupted her. You saw what you saw. As a doctor, as a scientist, can you really deny what you witnessed with your own eyes? Before the cardiologist could respond, the door to the room opened, revealing a tall man of about 60, with greying hair and a posture that conveyed quiet authority. He was formally dressed, with a discreet clerical collar indicating his vocation. Father Michael, Emily smiled, recognizing the priest from the parish she occasionally attended. What a pleasant surprise. "I heard about your accident and remarkable recovery," he replied, entering the room with a gentle smile. It seemed appropriate to make a pastoral visit. Sarah quickly composed herself. "I'll leave you two alone," she said, moving towards the door. At the threshold, she briefly turned to Emily. "We'll continue this conversation later. Please rest." After her departure, Father Michael sat in the chair beside the bed. There was something in his eyes, a sharpness, a perception that went beyond the usual role of a priest on a hospital visit. "Nurse Emily Richards," he said, studying her with interest. "You've become a small local miracle. The doctors are intrigued by your recovery." "You didn't come just to check on my health, did you?" Emily intuited. "Perceptive," he smiled. "Indeed, I received an interesting visit a few days ago. A lady named Teresa Sullivan asked me to meet you." The name meant nothing to Emily, but something in the way the priest pronounced it sent a shiver of recognition down her spine. "She said I would find here a woman marked by a vision," the priest continued. "Someone who received a warning about technology, spirituality, and the future of human connection with the divine." Emily felt her heart race. How could she know? "Because Teresa is also a marked one," he answered simply, discreetly rolling up his sleeve to reveal a small flame-shaped mark on his wrist. "As am I." The revelation hit Emily like a powerful wave. She wasn't alone. Others had received similar visions, similar calls. "How many of us are there?" she asked, barely able to contain her emotion. "We're identifying more every day. In the United States, we've already found 37 people who have had similar experiences in the last 8 months, all after moments of near death, all receiving physical marks and extraordinary abilities, all with the same warning about technological implants." Silent tears ran down Emily's face, not of sadness but of deep and overwhelming relief. The burden she had been carrying since the accident suddenly seemed lighter, shared with other shoulders. "Jesus told me I wouldn't be alone," she whispered. "And you're not," Father Michael confirmed. "In fact, the urgency to find you increased significantly. 3 days ago, the U.S. government officially announced a partnership with TechBridge, a multinational technology company, to implement the Digital Citizen Project in the country." Emily's blood froze in her veins. "What exactly is this project?" "Exactly what you saw in your vision. Subcutaneous microchips that will initially replace identity documents, payment methods, and medical records." The priest paused significantly. "The testing phase begins in just 2 weeks, with implantation in selected volunteers. Among them, several religious leaders from various denominations strategically chosen to demonstrate that the technology has no negative spiritual implications." Emily felt the weight of urgency fall on her shoulders again. It was real, it was happening, and faster than they could have imagined. "What can we do?" she asked, determination replacing the initial shock. "First, you need to fully recover your strength," the priest replied, standing up. "Then, when you're ready, Teresa would like to introduce you to the other marked ones. Together, we're developing a plan to expose the truth about these implants and offer alternatives for those who choose to resist." He extended a small card with just a phone number. "When you're discharged, call this number. We'll be waiting." After the priest left, Emily contemplated the Chicago skyline through the hospital window. The afternoon was advancing, tinting the clouds in orange hues. A new determination grew within her, fueled by the confirmation that she wasn't alone, that her calling was legitimate. "Time is short," she murmured to herself. "People need to know." On her chest, the small cross glowed faintly, inaudible and invisible to the world around, but a constant reminder of the mission that would now define her life, and possibly the spiritual destiny of millions. The McCormick Place Convention Center in Chicago buzzed with activity. Giant screens displayed the Digital Citizen Project. Logo while smiling, TechBridge executives and government officials circulated among journalists and VIP guests. The atmosphere was one of technological celebration, the United States entering the global forefront of integrated biometric identification. Among the well-dressed crowd, Cynthia Rivers discreetly adjusted the fake press badge hanging from her neck. In the 3 weeks since her discharge from the hospital, she had fully immersed herself in the world of the marked. People like her who had received divine visions and physical marks after near-death experiences. "Position confirmed," she whispered into the microphone hidden in her bracelet. "I'm approximately 60 feet from the main stage." "Received," responded Edward Thompson's voice in her earpiece. The former Army colonel coordinated the operation from a van parked 2 blocks away. Ryan is positioned in the technical control room. Father Anthony has infiltrated among the invited religious leaders. Teresa and the others are in their designated positions. The plan was bold, but necessary. The investigation conducted by the Marked had revealed that the digital citizen implants contained much more than simple identification. An additional component, undisclosed in official documents, emitted specific frequencies that subtly interfered with neural activity associated with spiritual and religious experiences. Most alarming was the discovery that religious leaders selected for the public demonstration would receive modified versions of the implants, without the spiritual inhibitor component, a calculated manipulation to ensure positive testimonials from figures trusted by their communities. "Attention, everyone," Edward's voice sounded again. "We have movement. Dr. Vanessa Parker, CEO of TechBridge, is heading backstage. The presentation should start in approximately 5 minutes." Cynthia took a deep breath, trying to control the anxiety growing in her chest. The last few days had been intense. Training, planning, spiritual preparation. Now everything came down to this moment. "Remember," Edward continued, "our goal is not to interrupt the event but to expose the truth. Ryan accesses the transmission system, replacing the official presentation with our material, while Cynthia uses her gift to create the necessary distraction. Teresa and the other Marked will be ready to demonstrate their abilities when called upon." The convention center lights gradually dimmed, a sign that the presentation was about to begin. On the main stage, a laser and hologram show created impressive effects, culminating with the projection of the United States map covered by a network of interconnected luminous points. "Citizens of America and the world," announced a powerful, male voice through the speakers, "welcome to the future of digital citizenship." Enthusiastic applause filled the room as the Secretary of Science and Technology took the stage, followed by the elegant figure of Vanessa Parker, CEO of TechBridge, a woman in her early 50s, perfectly styled black hair in a short cut that accentuated her angular face and keen eyes. "Today," the Secretary began with evident pride, "the United States takes a decisive step towards modernizing public and private services. The Digital Citizen Project represents not just a technological advance, but a revolution in how we interact with the government and with each other." As he spoke about the wonders of the new system, elimination of physical documents, reduction of fraud, instant access to essential services, Cynthia felt her mark warming under her blouse, a sensation she had learned to recognize as a spiritual alert. "Something's happening," she whispered into her communicator. "I feel a presence, hard to describe, like a spiritual shadow hovering over the event." "Stay strong," Teresa's calm voice responded. "Your spiritual senses are more acute now. You're perceiving what normally remains hidden." On stage, Vanessa Parker took the microphone, her presence commanding immediate attention. "The future is not just about technology," she declared with a calculated smile, "but about integration. Integration of services, of data, of lives. The digital citizen implant is tiny, the size of a grain of rice, but it will revolutionize how we exist in the modern world." Giant screens showed the small device in detail, a translucent chip with a metallic core designed to be implanted in the right hand through a simple and painless procedure. "And to demonstrate the absolute safety of this technology," Vanessa continued, "we have with us today representatives of the country's major religious denominations who not only support this initiative, but will be the first to receive the implants, confirming that there are absolutely no negative spiritual implications." In an organized line, leaders of various religious traditions took the stage. A famous evangelical pastor, known for his television programs, a Catholic cardinal from New York, a respected rabbi, and leaders of other denominations. Amongst them discreetly was Father Anthony, who had managed to replace one of the invited priests. "Ryan," Cynthia whispered urgently, "are you seeing what I'm seeing? They're really going through with this." "Yes," the scientist responded through the communicator. "I'm ready to intercept the transmission at your signal. Wait until the first implant is performed." On stage, doctors dressed in impeccable white coats prepared the implantation equipment, a device similar to a modified gun that inserted the tiny chip under the skin in a matter of seconds. "Our first volunteer," Vanessa announced proudly, "Pastor Paul Matthews, who will lead by example." The famous pastor sat in the prepared chair, smiling confidently at the cameras, while a doctor cleaned the space between his right thumb and index finger with an antiseptic. The implantation device was positioned. "Now," Cynthia whispered. At the instant the doctor activated the applicator, inserting the chip into the pastor's hand, several things happened simultaneously. The convention center lights flickered dramatically. The screens that displayed close-ups of the procedure suddenly changed, replaced by a documentary video prepared by the Marked, showing the true technical specifications of the implants, including the undisclosed neural modulator component. Ryan's voice, digitally altered to avoid identification, echoed through the speakers. "American citizens, what is being omitted from you is that these implants contain technology designed to subtly interfere with your ability to experience deep emotions and spiritual connections. This is not a conspiracy theory. These are technical data extracted from TechBridge's own internal documents." Instant panic took over the stage. Vanessa shouted orders to her technical team, while security guards rushed to locate the source of the unauthorized transmission. The secretary looked genuinely shocked, suggesting that perhaps even he didn't know the whole truth. "This is the moment," Edward's voice sounded in Cynthia's communicator. "Take action." Gathering all her courage, Cynthia moved quickly towards the stage, taking advantage of the confusion. Two security guards tried to intercept her, but hesitated when she raised her hands, which now emitted a soft blue glow visible to everyone around. "People deserve to know the truth," she declared with a firm voice, projecting it to be heard even without a microphone. "These implants are not just technological tools, they affect our very humanity, our spirituality." Cameras that previously focused on the official stage now turned to this extraordinary woman with glowing hands. On the screens, the documentary continued, now showing anonymous testimonials from participants in the secret testing phase who reported gradual loss of deep emotions, decreased empathy, and growing inability to feel connection during religious practices. "Enough!" shouted Vanessa, finally regaining some control of the situation. "Security, remove this terrorist immediately." The term terrorist provoked an instant reaction in the audience. Murmurs of indignation, cell phone cameras, pointed in all directions, recording every moment. It was then that Pastor Paul Matthews, who had just received the implant, suddenly rose from the chair, clutching his chest with an expression of intense pain. "Something's wrong," he mumbled, staggering. I feel as if something is being torn from me." His body collapsed, shaking violently. The doctors rushed to attend to him, but seemed confused about how to proceed. Cynthia, guided by her gift and completely ignoring the approaching security guards, ran to the fallen pastor. Kneeling beside him, she placed her hands on his chest. The blue glow intensified, enveloping both in a soft but unmistakable halo. "The implant is interfering with his spiritual connection," she explained, her voice now amplified by the still active microphones on stage. "His spirit is reacting, resisting the invasive technology." Under her healing hands, the pastor gradually stabilized. When he finally opened his eyes, there was a startled clarity in them, like someone waking from a nightmare. "I felt it," he whispered, loud enough to be picked up by the microphones. "For a moment I felt a veil descending over my soul, as if something was trying to separate it from God." Those words, coming from a respected religious leader, provoked greater commotion than any technical evidence could cause. The other religious leaders waiting their turn visibly recoiled, some making instinctive signs of protection. "This is ridiculous," exclaimed Vanessa, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Pastor Matthews is clearly suffering from an anxiety attack, perfectly understandable given the pressure of the moment and this criminal interruption. There is absolutely no scientific evidence that our implants affect anything beyond the functions for which they were designed." It was then that Father Anthony stepped forward, removing his partial disguise to be clearly recognized. "There is evidence, Dr. Parker," he declared with serene authority, "and not just scientific but spiritual." At an invisible signal, other marked scattered throughout the audience began to reveal their presence. One by one, approximately 20 ordinary men and women, of different ages, ethnicities, and appearances, formed a circle around the stage, each displaying their own luminous mark and manifesting their specific gift. Teresa Santos, with her dove-shaped mark on the backs of her hands, created a localized breeze that made papers fly in impossible patterns. Lucas Fernandez, a young student with a fire mark on his temple, lit small controlled flames at his fingertips. Mary Conroy, an elderly woman with a watermark on her ankle, transformed a glass of water into pure wine before the incredulous cameras. "We are the marked," Cynthia announced, helping the pastor to sit up. "Ordinary people who received a vision and a divine call to warn humanity about this technology. Each of us went through a near-death experience and returned with a message and a gift, not to impress but to confirm the truth of what we saw." On the largest screen, Ryan's face finally appeared, identifying himself as Dr. Ryan Mendez, a renowned neuroscientist who had abandoned his position at a prestigious university after discovering the hidden neurological effects of the implants. "The documents we are sharing clearly show that TechBridge knew from the beginning," he explained with scientific precision. "The HFL 3007 component of the implants generates specific frequencies that interfere with the brain centers associated with transcendent experiences. The effect is not immediate but gradual, so subtle that most people wouldn't notice the change until it was too late." As this bombshell revelation spread through the convention center and through the live broadcast to millions of viewers, something unexpected happened. Vanessa Parker, the powerful CEO who until then had been fighting to maintain control, suddenly seemed to give up. A strange, almost inhuman smile distorted her face. "You think you've won?" she said, her voice strangely altered. "But this is just the beginning. There are other projects, other technologies. What you see here is just the surface." She pulled the collar of her blouse to reveal a device implanted at the base of her neck, much more advanced than the simple chips presented to the public. "Some of us have already embraced the next stage," she continued, her eyes now reflecting an unnatural light. "True liberation comes from abandoning this illusion you call spiritual connection. Just neural noise, nothing more." "You're wrong," Cynthia responded with surprising compassion. "What you call neural noise is the very essence of what makes us human, our ability to transcend, to love beyond utility, to connect with something greater than ourselves." As she spoke, Cynthia slowly approached Vanessa, her hands still emitting the soft blue glow. "Let me show you what you've lost," she offered, extending her hand. For a brief moment, something flickered in Vanessa's artificial gaze. A spark, so of humanity, of fear mixed with longing. But before Cynthia could touch her, the executive abruptly retreated. "This doesn't end here," she declared coldly, before being evacuated from the stage by private security guards. In the vacuum left by her departure, the Secretary of Science and Technology, visibly shaken, approached the main microphone. "In light of these extraordinary revelations," he announced with a trembling voice, "the United States government is immediately suspending the Digital Citizen Project for a complete independent re-evaluation. If confirmed that information was deliberately concealed about significant side effects, those responsible will be held legally accountable." A roar of approval ran through the audience, while journalists rushed to transmit the unprecedented events. Social media exploded with videos of the fallen pastor, Cynthia's luminous hands, the marked demonstrating their impossible gifts. In the midst of the controlled chaos, Father Anthony approached Cynthia. "It's only beginning," he said softly. "What we saw today was the tip of the iceberg. The battle for the human soul takes many forms. "But we're not alone," Cynthia responded, observing the other marked who now gathered around her. "Ordinary. People called to something extraordinary." "No," the priest agreed. "We're not alone, and now the world knows." 3 months later, Cynthia watched the sunset from her balcony in Chicago. The public explosion of events at the McCormick Place Convention Center had transformed the national and international discourse on technology and spirituality. The Digital Citizen Project had been completely redesigned, with the neural modulator component removed and rigorous transparency protocols implemented. TechBridge faced investigations in multiple countries, and Vanessa Parker had mysteriously disappeared, fueling theories about much broader and darker conspiracies. More significantly, the marked had come out of the shadows. From all over the world came reports of people with similar experiences, physical marks, extraordinary gifts, and the same call to protect human spiritual connection against subtle technological threats. "Time is short," Jesus had said in her vision. Now Cynthia understood that it wasn't a prediction of an imminent end, but a reminder of the preciousness of our humanity, including our ability to transcend the material and connect with the divine. Her phone rang, showing Edward's name on the caller ID. New reports were coming in of similar implants being developed in Asia. The work continued. With a sigh that blended determination and serenity, Cynthia answered the call. The mark on her chest warmed gently, not as a warning but as confirmation. "I'm ready," she said simply. The battle for the human soul would continue to take new forms in new fields. But one thing was certain. As long as there were those willing to defend the connection between humanity and divinity, as long as there were marked responding to the call, there would be hope. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. Dear listeners, we hope that Cynthia's journey has deeply touched your hearts. To continue exploring stories that challenge the boundaries between faith and technology, we've prepared a special playlist with equally powerful narratives. Find it here by clicking to the left of your screen. If this story resonated in your soul, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and leave your comments below. Share with us how Cynthia's message echoed in your own lives and reflections on our humanity in such technological times. Each week, we bring new stories that remind us of the eternal truths that transcend our digital world. As Cynthia discovered, we are never truly alone in our spiritual journey. We eagerly await your return for our next narrative.